Even the most intelligent people in the world don't know everything. You can spend your whole life studying science or history, but there still will be things that you'll never completely understand. That doesn't just go for new discoveries, it also covers objects and places that were created by our ancient ancestors. We might have vastly underestimated the abilities and intelligence of the civilizations that came before us, because all of the things you're about to see remain a mystery to all the experts who've ever studied them. In the middle of the Saudi Arabian desert, you'll find an inhospitable lava dome in the region of 𝗺𝗃𝗃𝗃, covered in stone structures and strange markings. They've been there for more than 9,000 years and take the form of cones, circles, kites, and even what appear to be keyholes or gates. It's impossible not to feel a sense of foreboding when you look upon them, and it doesn't take a great deal of imagination to see why some people believe that this is the gateway to hell. The carvings are so large that they can be seen on Google Earth, and would have been a monumental undertaking for whoever created them. It's been a little over 100 years since they were discovered, but we're no closer to understanding their meaning now than we were then. The layout appears to be random, but surely nobody would put so much time and effort into a series of giant random carvings. What could they have been used for? Local Bedouin tribes who live in the area refer to them using a term that translates as the works of the elders, but even they have no idea who put them there. If we ever solve the mystery of the 𝗺𝗃𝗃𝗃 carvings, perhaps we could move on to solving the riddle of the petroglyphs in the Maharashtra region of India. There are thousands of them, many of which depict humans and animals, but some of the animals don't belong to this location. There are clear pictures of the rhinoceros and the hippopotamus, but the version of history that we currently believe says that there's no way African animals like that could have been known to human beings living in India 10,000 years ago. These are some of the oldest petroglyphs ever found on Earth, and so long-distance travel should have been out of the question for the tribes who created them. Either some animal species traveled much farther and wider than we think they did during ancient times, or our ancestors were much more accomplished when it comes to travel than we currently give them credit for. A fresh study of the primitive artwork was ordered in 2018, and it may eventually conclude that humans traveled from Africa to India much earlier than we thought they did. In 1782, Tsar Alexander I of Russia ordered a large-scale renovation of the Babelovsky Palace in Pushkin, a residence that was a personal favorite of his. The improvements he ordered included an octagonal tower, lancet windows, new parapets, and an unfathomably large bathtub. We're all familiar with the idea of having a large hot tub for entertaining friends, but this is ridiculous. You'd have to be a giant just to step over the rim and climb into it. Carved from one solid chunk of granite, then smoothed and polished, the bath is 8 feet tall, 6 feet deep, and 17 feet in diameter. It weighs almost 50 tons and can hold up to 12 tons of water. The palace is in ruins today after being abandoned during the Russian Revolution of 1917, but the bathtub is so well made that it's still in near pristine condition. Nobody knows why it's so big. Did the builder misunderstand the Tsar's directions? Or was the Tsar hosting secret bath time parties with gigantic friends? While we're on the topic of giants, more and more people are beginning to question the official narrative that giants have never existed on Earth. And that's because evidence that they did is beginning to pile up. If you've never heard or seen any of this evidence before, prepare to be amazed. Giant footprints have been found all over the planet, and they're hiding in plain sight. There are photographs from a Chinese village that show a person of regular size standing in what's clearly a footprint in ancient rock. The foot is obviously more than double the size of their own. Then there's the 4-foot-high footprint embedded in the rock close to the South African border with Swaziland, also clearly identifiable with toes on the end of the foot. The giant footprint of 𝗺𝗵 is one of the best-known examples of a giant footprint being discovered and recorded. You'll find that one in 𝗵𝗵𝗔𝗍, close to Bangalore. To make matters worse for scientists, the rock that surrounds some of these footprints has been shown to be hundreds of millions of years old. Are they relics of an era that predates human life as we know it? What do you think? In 2014, a man named Dmitry was trying to light a fire in his home in Vladivostok, Russia, using coal he'd gathered earlier that winter morning. As he sifted through the coal, he found a lump of carved aluminum, closely resembling part of a gear mechanism. As it was embedded with a solid lump of coal, he thought it was a very strange discovery, so he took it to the Primory-based biologist Valery Breyer. Valery's research suggested something impossible. The object was made of a blend of aluminum and magnesium and therefore couldn't have occurred naturally, yet it was around 300 million years old. Small gear pieces like this are used in a variety of different machines and electronic gadgets today, such as microscopes. How could such a thing end up embedded in a prehistoric lump of coal? To conspiracy theorists, there are only two possible answers. It was either left there by a human time traveler or by extraterrestrial visitors. Scientists would be quick to dismiss either possibility, but what else are we supposed to believe when there are no other answers? Let's stay in Russia for a moment, because here's another ancient Russian riddle that's been causing a lot of head-scratching in scientific circles. It's a figurine with a distinctive-looking feather headdress, and it turned up in a field used for growing potatoes in Novosibirsk. It was obviously made by human hands, but it's 5,000 years old. We have no records of any advanced human settlement in Siberia 5,000 years ago, and although there were a few nomadic tribes there, they weren't believed to have worn feather headdresses like this. There were a few Middle Eastern cultures who may have dressed like this, but they lived a long way away and died out around 2,000 years earlier. The last update we had about this strange figurine was that it would be sent for further testing in 2017, but after that, there's no more information. Maybe the experts are still studying it, or maybe their studies turned up some information that they'd rather the general public wasn't aware of, so they're staying silent on the matter. 2017 was also the year that researcher and photographer 𝗺𝗀𝘀𝘁𝘁 went out for a walk in the Kosovo Mountains and found something that defies both belief and description. We'll let the pictures speak for themselves as much as possible here. Your eyes don't deceive you. This is a rounded, shaped stone with an electromagnetic coil integrated within it. The wires are made of copper and are part of the stone itself rather than being added to it after the stone was created, as if the copper and stone were somehow fused together to make one artifact. There's also a series of convex bands carved into the stone acting as an insulator. In the reverse, 4 symmetrically engraved circles. The chances of this object occurring naturally are 0, and it's impossible to say that it could be anything other than a transformer. Here's the problem with that idea. 𝗺𝗀𝘀𝘁 submitted the artifact for basic testing and was told that it's 20,000 years old. That means that it can't possibly be a generator, and yet it so clearly is. Since then, 𝗺𝗀𝘀𝘁 has refused to submit his discovery for any further tests because he's convinced he'll never see it again if he does. Very little is known about Italian mapmaker Urbano Monte. We know that he was born in Milan and that his parents were aristocrats. We presume that he had a very keen interest in travel and geography. If he didn't, he couldn't have come up with the enormous map that he's famous for. A map that displayed knowledge that someone from his time shouldn't have had. The colossal map, made of 60 individual sheets of paper, measuring 27 square feet when fully assembled, has the North Pole at its center. A perspective that nobody else would have used in 1587 when Monte completed his work, and very few people use even today. His idea of Japan is a little off-kilter. It's positioned east to west rather than north to south, and yet it has accurate place names and locations marked on it that no other Western map of the era featured. Monte had never been to Japan. We have no idea how he acquired that knowledge or why he felt so able to draw the Earth as it might appear as if he were hovering far above the North Pole when he was making sketches. The much-fabled sculptures known as the Fat Boys of Guatemala might not have the most flattering name in archaeological history, but they do have some remarkable properties. As their title suggests, they're short, squat depictions of male figures. But there's more to the sculptures than just their shape. The pre-Olmec carvings, which stand in 𝗧𝗵𝗔𝗂𝘁𝗁 town square, are around 4,000 years old and possess a positive magnetic charge. The placement of the charges on the right-hand side of the head of each statue mean that this wasn't an accident. The artists who created them knew what they were doing. This predates the earliest known human experiments with magnetism, which happened in China about 2,000 years ago. The position of the statues created a U-shaped magnetic field, but what the ancient Mesoamerican civilization that created them would want with such a field is anybody's guess. There's no sign that they ever worked with iron, so they couldn't have had a practical use for one. Yet again, this is an ancient question without an answer. Returning to Europe, we find the statues known as the Giants of Monte Prama, standing close to Cabras on the western edge of Sardinia, an island that belongs to Italy. They're impressively large creations, each of them stands 8 feet tall, and they have large, flat, disc-shaped eyes that make many people who look upon them feel a little uneasy. They've stood the test of time, but nobody knows quite how much time they've spent standing there. Most experts place the date of their creation between 3,100 and 2,800 years ago and point to the 𝗺𝗃𝗃 civilization as the most likely builders. Unfortunately, our records of the 𝗺𝗃𝗃 people aren't extensive. They were driven from their land by the Roman Empire around 2,200 years ago, and the Romans stamped almost every trace of them out of existence. They must have taken a liking to the sculptures, though, because they left them alone. The 1974 discovery of ancient tombs close to the statues implies that they might have been positioned there to guard the dead. But that's just speculation. In the summer of 2019, a farmer named Tom Giddens felt his plow strike something solid while he was working his field in Sampson County, North Carolina, USA. When he got out to investigate, he found this battered, heavily eroded stone face. He immediately knew he was out of his depth, but understood that he might have discovered something historically important. That prompted him to get on the phone and call the experts. But unfortunately, the experts he spoke to didn't know much more than he did. And they still don't. The carving is large, almost 2 feet across from ear to ear, and closer to 3 feet from the top of the head to the chin. It's the fact that it's made from sandstone that makes it so hard to date. The substance erodes very quickly because it's soft, so this could be as comparatively recent as a century old, or it could be more than 1,000 years old. Archaeologists might be able to offer a better guess if the design was familiar, but it isn't. Nothing like this has ever come out of the ground in North Carolina before, nor anywhere near it. It might even be the work of an ancient fraudster. There's no shortage of candidates when it comes to trying to work out who made the so-called eye idols of Tel Brak. They're ancient, and they come from a part of Syria that was once occupied by the Sumerians, the Akkadians, and the Babylonians. That means we can narrow down the field, but we don't know which culture to thank for the curious alabaster statues. They range in size from a few inches to 1 or 2 feet, and they've come out of the ground in the shadow of a structure known as the Eye Temple. The bulging eyes of the carvings, which may have been used as tributes to the gods of the temple, have prompted a lot of UFO conspiracy theorists to suggest that this ancient Syrian culture might have had contact with extraterrestrials. But it's likely that they have a more symbolic meaning than we, with our modern eyes, are able to decipher or understand. Perhaps everyone's got it completely wrong, and these are actually nothing more than harmless statues of owls. It seems unlikely, though. A spiritual meaning is the most obvious answer, but the answer doesn't cover all of the questions. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.